to order. Today's date is June 26th, and the current time is 6:37 p.m. For today's meeting, the executive committee, you'll notice that we put some durations for each agenda item on the agenda. We believe, we estimated it okay well. So what we're going to do is try to stick to that time. And Lindsay has volunteered to help be the timekeeper. So she'll give us a minute warning if she needs to. If we're already done with that topic, then we don't. And then at the end, if we need to adjust for future, we'll talk about that. Okay? Though we've done kind of introductions, we didn't introduce ourselves officially and say our names. So I'm going to start it all over again for the record.
Brian Bauer.
Jason Chance.
Ellen Whelan-Weist.
Ellie Round.
Suzanne Buck.
Lindsay Heskott.
Jim Holcomb.
Barb Wilson.
Joanna Doria.
Mary Heather Noble.
Trisha Allen.
Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Heather Crowley, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent.
Caitlin Steele, in my last meeting as the district lead in teaching and learning.
Or missed you.
I won't be far away.
We're not letting you get very far.
She's also got the master key. So.
And we'll let you, even though it's not quite officially out, we'll let you introduce yourself.
On July 1st, Tim Williams, interim superintendent for the coming school year.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And is there still no one on Zoom?
No, it's just Will Hatch and Will.
We'll hatch twice, so that's cool. So because of that, see, we're making up time. What we can do now is move on to the next agenda item, which is recommendation to approve the minutes. We have two sets of minutes, one from 6/9, a special meeting, and 6/12.
Point of order. Could I make my comment at this point?
Sure.
All right. I asked for a few seconds just to thank everyone who wished me well after my full knee replacement surgery. And the surgery went very well, and I'm presently obviously in recovery. They have indicated it normally takes 6 weeks. I'm hoping for 5. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Brian. Thank you. So moving back to the agenda, recommendation to approve the minutes. The first set of minutes is June 9th. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve June 9th. I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. So then we're ready for the questions. So all those in favor of approving the June 9th minutes, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
We have a few. Now we'll move on to June 12th minutes, our last board meeting. Could I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the ACSD minutes of June 12th.
Second.
Second? Any discussion?
Just one note, which is that I think at the very bottom I noticed that the meeting adjourned at 9:15. The total meeting time is still listed at 1 hour and 10 minutes. So I don't know if we want to delete that from because I know that was the goal at the time, but we definitely exceeded it.
Yes. And I think that's an artifact of the tool
original.
plugging it in with the
Yeah.
times. Okay, any other discussion on the minutes?
They're good ones.
Yeah, again, thank you to Mary Heather.
As always, yes. So we're ready to approve the minutes. So those all in favor of approving the June 12th board meeting minutes, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Brian? Okay. Now moving on to the approval of the ACSD bills. I'm going to turn it over to Chip.
Jason and I read the bills today. They were the only bills since our last meeting. And there were 5 warrants. The first one is for the general fund of $494,479.85. probably 150,000, at least of that is in transportation. I didn't add up all the food service things because there's $1 billion of them, but a lot of it's made up of those two things. The second one is a warrant for a Keewaydin McGilton Fund to the Keewaydin Foundation for $18,810. Presumably for the spring, which we okayed. The third one is the regular payroll warrant for $383,661.29. The second one is for a sort of extra payroll that just didn't make it under that one for $19,270.08. And then a biggie for $2,547,984.47. I always question those, obviously. So in talking with Gail, this one is basically paying for all the summer work for faculty and other folks that are in that, and it's done before the end of the fiscal year because it comes under that. So that's why it's so large. There were no problems, and I make a motion that we accept these bills.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? If not, hearing none, then all those in favor of approving the ACSD bills, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the ACSD bills are approved. Moving right along, we're now under report of the board, and you'll notice for this particular agenda that items that typically would have been under the superintendent report are consolidated underneath the report of the board for this particular meeting. And you do have all those documents and artifacts in your board pack. So the first one that we need to approve is the professional appointments. In the board pack, there were several folks that were either changed or added, and we need to approve those. So do I have a motion to approve the professional appointments?
I'll move to approve the professional appointments of departing new hires and transfers.
Thank you. And a second?
Trish?
Any discussion?
I have a question. Oh, Lindsay already first.
Might be the same question. My understanding is it says Jennifer Urban Shoreham, and I thought that it was a split position between Shoreham and Bridport, and that the Bridport principal was also a split position, and I'm wondering if this will be adjusted to reflect the, so that when we do all the reports and everything, it's accurately listed, like.
Right. Because as far as I understand, basically Matthew is going to be the primary principal, the head principal over both Shoreham and Bridport, and then she will be the assistant. So neither one of them are assigned specifically to a school. So we can take that back and.
I can bring it back to her.
Okay,
That
that
was
was,
comments. Yeah.
yeah. And whoever put together the artifact is basically.
Gail each. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So it'd be like 50-50 Matthew, 50-50 Jennifer, or something like that.
Yeah, well, I would just basically list both schools
Yeah.
for the purpose of that.
But he's not even on here, so.
And he's not on.
Yeah,
reflecting
that's my question. Is,
Yeah. So probably have Matthew listed on there as well, with a split between
Yeah.
Shoreham and Bridport
You
as
can't
well.
add him to this because he's not on here for the motion. You'd have to bring it the next time.
Okay. So we could wait. Do we want to, we can delay approving this
You
until
can approve these, but you can't approve,
the corrections?
well, you can't approve Matt.
Yeah, okay.
So we could approve departing and new hires and table the transfers till.
I think we could even approve the transfer, if I'm hearing you right, Suzanne. We
You can approve as was written here. The next time around, we'll get another document that shows that Jennifer is part-time Bridport, and it'll show Matt's switch in place.
Yeah.
But Heather had a question, and I had a question.
Heather?
And Mary
Mary
Heather.
Heather.
Well, and actually, Joanna brings up a good point. Is it possible to approve pending corrections? Or, I mean, the thing, we can't approve with Matt because Matt wasn't on.
Right, but we could have with Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
But my question has more to do with Andy. I wasn't sure if he was departing the district or whether he was taking a different position in the district. So that was a clarification.
I believe he's resigned.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Otherwise, he might have shown up below
Right.
in another position.
Right, okay.
So what I'm going to suggest is we approve them based on the list, pending a change that Jennifer, Jenny would be listed for both. Does that make sense for Shoreham and Bridport?
So we would need to make a motion to
Amend the original motion.
Right.
What if we just amend it so that we approve the departing and the new hires, and then we wait on the transfers until we have the addition of Matthew and the modification of Jennifer?
I'm good
So
with
we're
that.
not holding up.
Do you want to make that motion?
Sure.
Right. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes.
Okay,
There's a motion on the table that I don't believe has been seconded, so
okay.
you either vote that one down.
Or amend the motion.
Could you read the motion that's on the floor? We're getting ourselves, I'm getting confused.
So the motion that was made by Suzanne was to approve the professional appointments of departing, I didn't get all the words, but.
Departing new hires and
Yeah,
transfers.
and transfers.
Can I move to amend that motion, and then that amendment is
Yes.
voted on, and then the motion that you made?
Yes,
Suzanne?
that's the proper way to do it.
So that's what I move to amend Suzanne's motion to remove transfers from the approval and instead move forward with new hires and departing.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on the amended motion?
Does that impact Jenny being able to start her new position? July 1st? Because we're not in until August, right?
What are we looking at here?
Can I just say that when we hire somebody, they have to be assigned to a primary cost center for the sake of payroll. And so if somebody's split between two buildings, they still will show one location on their paycheck just because that's how our system writes the check. With the understanding that, their job description is split across multiple locations. And I think in the sense that, it was Andy out and Jenny in, I think that was the logic behind this, even though the assignments and the building assignments have been modified. I don't know that necessarily needs to be reflected on the professional appointments, even though the logic that everyone has voiced does make sense. And, we could go back and do a correction if that needs to be done. But at the end of the day, everybody does need a cost center associated with them just to get into the system so that we can get going.
Thank you for that explanation.
And doing this, delaying could, to what you're saying, Jason, it might get in the way of her being able to just start to work,
This is
potentially.
just a cost center that she's going to get tied to for payroll, yeah.
So,
Let's vote on
Did
the
Suzanne
amendment.
have something to say?
say that again, I
Did
didn't.
Suzanne have something to say? You had wanted to go after Mary Heather.
The only thing I wanted to know was, is Jennifer licensed as a principal?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not positive she's licensed as a full principal, but she has taken coursework in that arena.
It does say assistant principal on this.
But it's pretty much the same certification. I was just making sure that she was certified.
Right, based on what Peter has shared, it basically said, he didn't say she was certified, but she had taken, coursework. So, I can't tell you this.
Recently completed the St. Michael's School Leadership Program.
Right,
Which just, so then from there, then you have to get the English on your license. So that's what I'm asking.
yeah. I don't know that. Yes, Lindsay.
When she served as assistant principal at Mary Hogan, I think it was a provisional, and then she went to this, so it's, she's following the process, but I would be curious to know when she will have the official, if there's a target date for her to be official.
And she was assistant principal at Mary Hogan and then went back to classroom teacher for several years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think it would be really nice to have to know those details.
She was a dean of students.
Yeah.
It's not an administrative position.
Oh,
So I'm open to suggestions on this particular one.
You can vote on the motion as it is, but I would just want to make sure that at some point that she,
Just for the motion.
So the current motion,
The current motion, excuse me,
yeah.
yes. Mary Heather, did you have I was going to talk about the
Go ahead.
current. No, I was just going to say we have an amendment on the floor, and that's, I thought so. So we have an amendment, so we do need to vote on the amendment. And basically, your amendment was that we would only vote for the new appointments and departing. Any other questions on that before I call a vote on that? Okay, so all in favor of the amendment to basically vote on the appointment as well as the person leaving, respond by saying aye.
she need to,
Yeah, we're gonna need to go around. I need,
I'm sorry?
can you put hands up? Show me a visual indicator. Thank you.
It doesn't seem necessary.
Okay.
Okay, all of those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Can I vote?
No.
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 Okay. All right.
Any abstentions? Brian?
Okay, so now we need to vote on the amended motion.
And so what was the vote tally?
7 ayes, 2 nays.
Okay, so now the amendment, could you read what the amended motion would now read?
Motion to approve only the professional appointments and departing staff and not the
Transfers.
Departing and new hires, right?
Departing and new hires, right.
Can I ask a question?
Let's make a motion. Well, no, you can't, because this is on the floor, sorry.
So I'm confused as to why some people were not approving that. Did we not want to do that now? Lost.
After Matt's description of what the purpose of this was, I didn't feel like it was necessary.
same.
Any other discussion? Okay.
I'm still curious now if we're going to vote for this to go through like this, if it's going to mean that she can't start July 1st and we're messing that up. Because we don't want to do that.
I thought Matt said it was a cost center issue.
Right, but now that we're going to vote not to approve it because of the amendment, then.
Right, my understanding, and maybe this is wrong, is that it won't prevent her, it's a question of which cost center she's going to bill to, not if she'll start the work itself on July 1st.
Like she was a contract, this isn't going to affect the contract.
I think it does.
It does, it
I think
does.
absolutely does.
Right. This is, what we are approving is the appointments.
Right, so what he was saying is if we approved it as is, it would be fine because it's just a cost center thing. But if we don't approve it, it's going to mess things up.
It's going to be waiting until we meet again in August. Yes, and
Right.
she will not be.
Oh, I totally did not understand that. I thought that it was a cost center issue, was the only question.
Her
Okay, then
appointment
I,
needs to be assigned
got it.
to.
okay.
So how do we fix that? Do we not vote?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I think
So
we vote
just
it
vote
down
against
and then.
it.
Yeah,
start
okay.
over? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
We're learning.
I don't have my Robert's rules with me today. So, we basically have to get
Call
rid
the
of,
vote. Call the vote
Yeah.
on this, and if you are
Oh.
concerned about that, vote no.
okay. And then, okay. So,
the Robert's Rules flow chart.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
It's small writing, but.
yes. So at this point, we are voting on the appointments, the new appointments, and the, what's the word, departures. And departing and new, and not transfers. All those in favor, say, what you want, you need a comment, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm still confused. Are we going to have another motion after
Yes.
this one?
Yeah, we
Yes.
have to reintroduce it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that we don't delay her actually.
I thought, but I didn't want to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're getting
We're gonna
tangled
start-
in the
we're
weeds
gonna
here,
start
guys.
from
Yes, we are, yes, we are. Okay, so all those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Can't vote. Any abstentions? Okay, so now we voted that down. Now we
Now, can
have
go back to my
the original
motion?
motion. And,
Yes, and
Yes.
we should call a vote.
yes, and we'll call a vote on the
Okay.
original.
So I move to approve the ACSD departing new hires and transfers.
And
2023-24 school year.
A second?
Yeah. I
I'm
will
going
second it,
with
yeah.
Tricia.
Yes. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the appointments, the professional appointments, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And thank you, Ellie, for pursuing that. That was, I really appreciate
Or
that.
can I just ask one question though? So can Matthew start the work July 1st, even if he's not been indicated as a transfer? Can he start working in Bridport?
He is in Bridport originally.
Or sorry, in Shoreham? Okay.
Yeah.
Because he's on the budget, he's
He's already
assigned to the
assigned
cost
to the
center,
cost
he's working for
Right.
ACSD,
Okay.
and his
Right.
responsibilities for ACSD may
Or similar
be
enough, okay.
tinkered around
Whereas
with, but he's
Jen,
in the budget.
He's on the payroll.
Covered, yeah.
whereas she gets a promotion, right? She was a
Yeah.
teacher,
Got it.
and now she's in this new position.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, guys.
I did find out that she has requested the provisional principal endorsement, and the AOE has said it will not be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay, so we voted on this?
Yes, it passed.
I'm getting a little,
I know, that was not what my intention was. Next, we have on our agenda action to approve the auditor bid. And a copy of the bid was submitted by R.H.R. Smith and Company, and it was included in the meeting materials. This is a 5-year contract with an annual cost not to exceed $42,500. So first, can I have a motion to approve the auditor bid?
I'll make a motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And at this time, I invite Matt to address any questions that folks might have.
Matt, you had said this is who we've been working with in the past, correct?
Yes,
We discussed this at
last,
Yeah.
last meeting,
Yeah,
and we
sure.
couldn't because it wasn't warned as an action item.
Yep, right.
Unless there's
We
something
just
else
had it.
that, this was,
Yeah.
can I make a comment? I'm sorry.
yes, thank you.
This was sort of a no-brainer because there were only 2 bids. This was the company that we've worked with for a while and has established they were a little slow in doing certain things, partly our fault and partly theirs. But their numbers are so much better relative to the 5-year contract than the other bidder, which was local. It didn't make sense that there wasn't any reason to go with the other.
Any other discussion? Okay, so then I think we're ready for the question. All those in favor of approving the A.H.R. Smith and Company auditor bid, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Sorry, isn't it RHR?
Correct.
R.H.R., sorry.
Well, I just wanted to make sure we were approving the right company.
know
Are
what you're
there-
talking about, Barb.
I lost power this afternoon, so are there any opposed by responding by saying nay? Any abstentions? The R.H.R. Smith and Company auditor bid is approved. Thank you. Next, we have action to approve the ACC transportation contract proposal.
Comment?
You're gonna have a motion.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yes. The 3-year contract is for the Addison County Consortium, for the Addison County Consortium, which is our 3 districts within Addison County, going into a consolidation or consortium together on this particular bid. And it is my understanding that the 2 other districts have already approved the proposal. We had this on our agenda last time to approve, but it wasn't warned properly, so we couldn't. So first, I'd like a motion to approve the contract proposal.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Chip, and Ellen will second it. Discussion.
Comment?
Brian.
Two quick things. I'm going to recuse myself from both discussion and voting on this particular agenda because it directly affects me. Okay?
Works for us.
Secondarily, my hope is that sometime in the future we could discuss transportation in other terms than finance.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Any other comments, discussion, questions?
Can I make one comment? Matt, if you can correct it, or we had discussed this a lot too, obviously, with many different approaches from different people last time, but the process would be that this will be for, yes, 3 years, but we will start much earlier with the other 2 districts because we're now in the same rhythm, correct?
Yeah,
All of
and
us in the
they're-
same
correct.
same place, so that we can start early enough to at least put out things so that if there are, or if we can encourage any other bids from outside sources that would want to make that investment and do it, we didn't have that chance. So just so people, because we had a long discussion, the board and finance committee, on all of this, and it's complicated and it's hard working when you only have one vendor. I don't know if that's the case in everywhere else in the country, but it seems to be the case in Vermont. It's only gotten worse.
And Lindsay?
What Chip said, it would be helpful to have the timeline, when should we start the process of, for the next stage? And then what does that look like? Is it, and just, these are questions I have that I don't expect to get answered tonight, but when the 3 parties come to the table, is that at the board level or at the district level where they're sending their equivalent of MAT to the
Right.
table?
Right,
It's not at the
yes.
board.
It's not
Okay.
at the board level.
But
I mean,
approve it.
yes. So
Okay.
if you look at the signature page, it's the board chair for each of the districts have to sign off on it. But Matt's been working with his counterpart in the other districts to come up with this common approach. They tried to go out, bid for an RFP response, but didn't have enough time, to have people respond.
Yeah, it's like 2-year lead time we're supposed to be
Yes,
working
yeah.
on.
But in
Okay.
this particular case, this particular contract needs to be approved so that we can have transportation for our kids this fall.
Okay.
Right? It's totally, and this will take us over the course of the next 3 years.
Okay. Well, I would find it help, building on what Brian says, if we could add on a different meeting, discussion of transportation that has other, including, whatever other topics, but it would be really helpful to have sort of a timeline and what does the process look like for ourselves and for the public, it's kind of a big unknown
Right. So, yeah, so in the future, we can definitely, in this part of that RFP process going forward, try to do something. Maybe there's this ad hoc committee for a while. We can talk as a board to figure out what we would like that to look like. But for now, is there anything specific to this particular proposed contract? Yes.
So there's a couple places in the contract where it refers to the districts as a single entity, and there's a couple places where it refers to each district having its own sort of say and stuff. So I just want to make sure you're comfortable with the language in there that when it's districts, it's really like all three districts being responsible and challenging the vendor in a certain way, so.
Yeah, that was something that, language-wise was a little tricky because we were stitching together three districts in cooperation and collaboration for the sake of building a little bit more clout at the bidding table. We didn't get any other bidders out of it, but I think it's still a good strategy when it comes to the RFP and then the subsequent contract, which is based off that RFP. But at the end of the day, the contract that we're signing is an ACSD contract with, our own governance on it. And so we're not sort of beholden to either of the other two districts when it comes to our administration of the contract and, assessing liquidated damages or, anything that's, service-related issues or behavior-related issues.
Okay, Suzanne.
I was wondering about the cameras in the bus and the fee for the cameras and who sees those tapes, where are the tapes stored? We've had this conversation before, but it's not clear in here, where that information is kept and who's allowed to see it. And my other question is, I know personally that there are several bus drivers that park the buses at their homes and then drive to pick up kids. So do we get charged for the fuel and the time before they actually start their bus route, or is that picked up by Betcha on their own? I mean, some of them drive quite a ways before they start their bus route. So that's why, that's one of the reasons I asked.
I think we have language in there which suggests that the route starts at the edge of the county line. So.
I've read it. I know there was something in there on that. Do we need to look that up?
Well, it's just a curiosity because, if we're paying for people to use the buses as their private vehicles back and forth to pick up students, that's another place that, when we go forward, that we can look to trim things.
Can you find that in the contract that you just referred to?
Sure. It's 90 pages, or 68 pages.
I know.
Yeah, I know, it's like,
This is for transportation in the future.
Well, no, this particular one is for our contract.
No, I know that. I'm just saying, we got to vote for it. So.
Yes, we got to.
right. And it's just something to keep in mind if they're, if that's another cost that's being rolled into this, that the whole district is paying for, it's another place to look to change.
Is it important to have that answer before we vote?
Probably not.
Are you okay with that?
They've been doing it for years, so.
Okay.
I'm not going to change it now. Change in the future, maybe.
Well, that's what I was saying, yes.
Oh, for future, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, but we're talking about this specific school year contract.
And then my other one about the cameras, because I couldn't find it, and then what they do with the tapes and such. So, and that's just a concern.
Mary Heather.
Just my recollection on the discussion about the cameras, when Will Hatch was talking about the school cameras and data, keeping data for that, I believe the camera data for the buses is housed by Betcha. And
yes.
I don't know the exact arrangement, but I know that's something that Will has also got his eyes on.
Okay.
And there is requirement in here that it has to be handed off within a certain time period. I read that, if it is needed for any particular immediate reason.
Right.
I remember reading that because I reviewed this today. Any other comments, questions on this contract? Yep, none?
I have a question. I
Oh, I'm
already
sorry.
asked a question, is it, but so I don't know if it's okay for
You
me.
can ask another.
I was trying to find in here, so this year we had a lot of route cancellations. I'm-
Page 13.
So I imagine that will continue just because that's the time we're in. With the two other districts, how will they be prioritizing and resolving that? You know, are we still sort of operating functionally as three separate districts where, you know, if Mount Abe has 5 cancellations and, you know, ACSD has none, might they redistribute things across districts? Or combine routes or something? Are we getting that creative
No,
with
we're not planning to mix routes across school districts
Okay.
in this agreement.
So in that way, we're still functioning
Right.
separately? Okay.
Right,
We addressed the issue by increasing liquidated damages clauses so that as route cancellations have escalated impact on service that we provide, we have the ability to escalate the damages accordingly. So it just
Okay.
gives us a little more recourse.
So it's like an administrative level where that's going to happen. They wouldn't, okay.
right. And if you look in the contract, you know, we have our bus routes, Mount Abe has their bus routes, as does Addison Northwest. It's separated at that level.
Correct.
But this gives us a little bit more leverage than we've had in the past when we have bus drivers not available.
Gives us scalability
Yeah.
to respond to, you know, so, you know, if a single route is missed because of, you know, a driver illness or something like that, it's not necessarily going to trigger a, you know, a punitive response, but if we have,
Systemic.
you know, a whole semester worth of missing a bus line, there's a different action that we can take.
Yeah.
So there's,
I just
There
couldn't
is
find the
more.
functional side of it in
there is
here.
more than we've had
Okay.
before.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, then I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of approving the ACC transportation contract proposal, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying nay? No opposed, and abstentions? Just-
So I think you better put in the cues.
He recused himself.
He refused, okay. Okay, nice discussion. Before we go on to the next discussion item, what I appreciate folks doing is raising their hands, so I can call on you instead of just, there's a few times people just start talking, so it'd be helpful if folks would raise your hand so I can call on you. Next discussion is review policies C1, C15, D23, F3, and F4. And I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne as chair of our policy committee to talk about these policies in general, not very briefly, and address any questions folks have.
So these policies are all brought forward for first read. They'll come forward again at the retreat in July for second and final read. We're going to start at the bottom. F4 and F3 are required, mandated by the state. They have to be on the books by August 1st. So one is access control and visitor management, that's F4. And that's basically, you know, how do people access our buildings, how do we keep logs, where do we store the logs. F3 is fire and emergency preparedness drills, something we've been doing, but a sneaky suspicion that some schools may not have been doing them, and hence we now have to have a policy in place. D23, selection of instructional materials, it's almost an identical policy to the instruction library instructional materials that we did last fall. C15, student conduct and discipline, was one that was requested because someone wanted to make sure that they had a student conduct and discipline policy that they could use, and they wanted it in their student handbook.
Also required by the state.
It's also required by the state. So certain things kind of slide in when. And the last one, C1 educational records came about because we had an interesting request from the high school guidance group that they, records were overflowing their boundaries, and they wanted a policy on how to deal with records. And, well, they haven't thrown out anything since,
2010.
yeah. So they have file cabinets upon file cabinets, so
Oh,
student
Like cold
records.
we're not storing them in a, okay. I'm asking you.
So we answered their questions on what, you know, the AOE has a very nice 14-page printout. It talks about every type of educational record you can imagine and how long you have to keep it, and where you need to keep it, what you need to do to get rid of it. So we referred to high school back. So that policy is very nice for high school principals / staff who are sitting there and gave them permission. And then we browsed over to C1, the educational records, which is also required, and decided we would make sure that that one was on the books as well. So first read on these, second and final read will be July 18th of that.
Thank you. With D23, because you had said it's similar to, pretty much like the library policy we had, will we be eliminating?
No, so the library policy is library materials, this is instructional materials,
Thank
two
you.
separate policies, very similar in plans.
Ellen?
I have two questions. The first is, can you explain what the first versus second versus final read means in context of what we're going to be doing tonight? Is this more like?
We're just
reading?
discussing.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
not voting on anything.
We're not voting, this is
Okay.
just discussion,
So
and the vote would happen at our next meeting.
by state statute, you are supposed to bring them forward to review, and then have to warn them a minimum of 10 days before you can vote to approve them for final approval, so that they're in the books.
My second question was regarding the student conduct and discipline policy, which, if I'm reading it correctly, sounds like the individual principals of different schools develop their own plan. And there's guidance to what should be included or shall be included. And then the superintendent or a designee ensures analysis of student discipline data prevents or demonstrates that there isn't disproportionality in discipline. But I was curious why, my concern is that we potentially end up with really different plans across schools if they're being developed by 9 different leaders in the building. So I was curious if there was thinking or discussion about that at all, and sort of immediately designating the principals without necessarily bringing the superintendent in earlier to inform the plans to make sure that there's consistency across all the buildings.
So I'm pretty sure that at the administrative team, they all sit with the superintendent, and when they get this policy, once it's approved, they'll write procedures to go with it, but they'll probably write it as a team and verify that, you know, what you might use to suspend a student as an elementary student maybe a little bit more different than what you might do for a high school student.
Sure. I'm, as much as anything, I'm thinking about 7 different elementary
Yeah.
schools where you have the same, essentially the same age kids.
Right, but
So
I'm pretty sure that they're gonna write their procedures probably as a group.
feels like something that should be in policy, though. I think I would ask or want to explore if we could establish that sort of consistency backstop in the policy, so we're not relying on best practice without spelling it out.
Was this a policy that came from the School Board Association?
Yeah. And this is the one that had, one of the ones that had been on hold because Montpelier got into, under definitions where it says weapon means a device, instrument, material, or substance that can be used to produce death or seriously bodily injury. Some of the lawmakers decided that weapon could also be your car. And so they held it up, and they still haven't come to terms over making sure that a weapon is not your physical car driving on school grounds. So,
Would it be possible to bring this back to the School Board Association? And, because I understand what Ellen's saying, it seems like you would want the policy to talk about being consistent across the schools, you know, up at the elementary level instead of, right now it's fairly open and it could be, each school can do their own thing.
It reads to me like the principal works with the educational staff, which I interpreted as being within that building. And I would just see like the superintendent being the person who has visibility, and maybe some others in central office, but visibility across all schools, particularly at the elementary level, to be able to make sure that it all reads like it's consistent. Otherwise, you're going to end up with disproportionalities in discipline because you'll have different plans
Across schools.
Brian has the same one.
Brian?
Yeah, I'd like to key on the word consistency that I've heard for maybe 10 minutes, and it's very important. It's important in transportation because each of these schools seem to have their own rules as to how the kids are supposed to behave. It should be consistent across the district, not piecemeal.
Sorry, Brian, you mean behavior
Yeah,
as
on
part
us.
of,
As a
Responsibility.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Any other discussion? Chip?
Just a question relative to if we're discussing this so that when it comes up this next, well, we have, well, two of them have to be next time anyway.
Right.
Future, then either we vote it down because there's not enough clarity in your consistency situation, or we vote it up and then make sure that the procedures are, as Suzanne was talked about, consistently written and hopefully formulated by what's appropriate across the whole district.
the only thing I will remind the board is that procedure is not ours. The policy is ours. The actual procedure that goes with each policy does not belong to the realm of this board.
Right.
It belongs
Right, we're not
to
writing
other
the
people.
plan. Yeah.
So, just to be very clear that what it says in the procedures, we have no say over because it's not our alley.
Other than to ensure that it meets the policy.
No, we've given them the policy, they write the procedures to go with the policy. We don't oversee the procedures.
Suzanne, what do you mean by procedures?
So procedures such as, so when you were talking about the discipline plan, that would be a procedure to this policy. We don't oversee that. That is the administrative team. The only person that we oversee is the superintendent. So how he gives his staff input and how he helps them write their discipline plans is not up to us.
I think I'm following you, so I'm just gonna say what I'm thinking and tell me if this is in line with what you're telling us, Suzanne. So we can, in theory, in the policy say, the plan will be developed by the principal in consultation with the educational staff and the superintendent. We could like add the superintendent to who consults on developing the plan. But we wouldn't get into, and I mean, there's some rules in here, there have to be guidelines that we put in the policy, but otherwise we're not mucking in the procedures of what the conversations look like between those people. We're just establishing sort of who's at the table.
Right, and this pretty much already tells you that, you know, the superintendent is responsible overall for it. And then the, you know, superintendent goes down to the administrative, gives it to the principal, and then they write it.
I guess I'm just not seeing that. I read it as though the superintendent only got involved once it was looking at data to make sure that there weren't discrepancies. Or disproportionalities in the way the discipline's enacted. But that's in here, because my objective is really just making sure that there's some consistent policy across the elementary school.
So time check?
So,
We're
yes,
over.
right, we're over, definitely. So is it possible to go back to the School Board Association and talk about, or we could make our change?
What I see is just Ellen wants to align the language that includes the
Right.
superintendent in looking at the analysis of the data and align that language to the top of the administrative responsibilities paragraph. And I think the policy committee can do that without bringing it back to the School Board Association. We can discuss that. That would be my recommendation. I think the other confusing thing when we talk about procedure is that a lot of the procedures aren't available for us to even read or look at, or the families, and that's something the policy committee has also discussed. So your question of like, what's a procedure? There's a couple of policies online that have procedures attached to them, but not all of them.
Right. Thank you. Any other discussion? Brian?
Yes, I have a general comment. I think the term review that we're using is incomplete. What's lacking is that the board is not addressing or reviewing any of these policies' effectiveness in accomplishing its intended purpose. To me, that's a review. I don't know what we're doing with these except wording. So I think it's essential that the board must take each policy and see whether it's being effective in accomplishing its purpose, and if it's not, modify it or get rid of it.
Any other comments? Okay. So that completes the policy update. And the remaining major item on the agenda is to talk about the board retreat. And at this point in time, the board retreat, we've scheduled it for July 18th based on folks' availability to get the most folks that would be available. 9 board members have confirmed that they would be able to attend. One thing I'd like to establish here is whether or not, if we started it at 4 p.m., would folks be able to attend? So would anyone not be able to attend? This is a Tuesday. It'd be about 10:15.
Same with me.
Okay, so then I think we should start it at 4:30 so that everyone is there from the start.
And we need to start right on time.
Yes, I agree. And we will provide a meal through the course of the retreat as well. Elaine Pickney, who facilitated our May training, will be available to facilitate our retreat as well. And there's the replacement, the new director of board services at the School Board Association. I mean, yes, she wants to come and just observe because she's new to the position. So as long as no one has any issue with having an extra person in the room, I thought that would be okay.
Question?
Yes,
Question.
Brian,
What is the location?
it'll be here.
Right here, okay, thank you.
I'm assuming it'll be here. I need Heather to check and verify that. My goal,
I think I already checked and it's
thank you.
available.
Thank you. Yes, Lindsay?
Are we looking at a duration of 4 hours?
I would say 3 maybe, you know. But let's talk about kind of the content of what we'd like to accomplish.
Well, I'm asking with the availability piece that I could come early as far as availability goes. It sounds like we have a quorum, but I have something in Virgin's at 6. But I'm available, you know, I could, you know. So if it was at 4, I could be there until 5:30 or so. If it's at 4:30, I mean, I could be there for a very small part of it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely, we'd love to have you, so, you know, come for what you
Okay.
can. So then we'd have 10 for a period of time, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm the same boat, I have a 6 o'clock engagement that evening.
Okay, so that would be great.
I could go earlier in the day, but yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Suzanne?
This may not be a popular thought, but we were all elected to represent this district, and board retreats are exceptionally important. And this one I feel is even more important, so considering we're starting out our work for the new year with an interim superintendent. And I really feel that there are times when, you know, you have to readjust calendars to make the board work. And I don't say that lightly. I have readjusted my calendar numerous times to make board meetings, but we were elected to represent the district and to represent everyone, and I just really feel that we need to really think about when we have meetings coming up and choose or find other reasons not to be here.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any, Mary Heather?
I just want to concur.
Is there,
Holly, thank you.
is there a way to maybe have more discussion about dates that get picked? Because like, it feels hard when like, every single date that gets thrown out works except for one, and that's the one.
Right. I agree. It's really tough because we had a set of dates that we could use, and basically people responded, and I tried to take the most folks that were available on that particular date. And I think in the future, if we could have a calendar that's out further so people have time to adjust, it would be much better. A lot of boards, they have kind of a set schedule that they use that I've learned from other board chairs. And that way, then you would have ample time to make sure that there's not a conflict, that you're not scheduled, you know, for vacation, what have you, or other commitments. But there's always going to be, you know, some particular case. If you have a job of the town, whatever, you know, that's, you know, you're not expected to quit your job, you know, in order to attend a board meeting, a special meeting as well. But I agree, I think we have to get better at really laying out what our schedule looks like, you know, and it's been really abusive over the last several weeks and months with the superintendent search, because we were setting meetings at the drop of a hat, because we had to. Chip?
I agree with Suzanne, but I think the practicality is July and August is a terrible time to expect 13 of us to all be available. I don't care what, it's not just rearranging a few hours here or there. So there's rules for quorum. I agree we're elected, but if that person cannot be here, that means they don't have a part to play in what our discussion is. And that's to their detriment, being on the board, as long as also to the public who isn't being represented by them, so to speak. But I don't know. I just don't think there's another way to do this other than not do it. And I just, we get 9, that's pretty good.
What else
also caution us against a tone that I think implies that people's commitment is not strong because they have scheduling conflicts, especially 2.5, 3 weeks out. I think everyone's really committed to being on the board. I think everyone has shown up a lot. And to Chip's point, there are 13 of us, and we can't always meet at the exact same time. Unless maybe we schedule things out 6 months in advance, and even then, I bet it would be tough. So I don't think it's a question of commitment. I think it's reality. Thank you. Lindsay?
I agree with her perspective. I also plan personally way in advance, and I plan on not having meetings in July. And the majority of the nights in July I'm available, but the ones that were proposed, I wasn't. And, the majority of the year, like my own son gets second priority to the board a lot of the times, which isn't really fair to him, but that was the commitment I made. But, there are moments when I'm not going to choose the board over something where my son's going to be alone someplace. And that's, I do put him second, a lot. I show up to all the meetings. So it's, I really want to be there. I don't want to miss it. If we had been given more options for dates, I probably would have been available 3/4 of the dates out of the whole month. But it just, I don't take it lightly when I'm not able to go to an event at all.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I have a suggestion for
Yes.
how we could do this in the future. Either SurveyMonkey or something like it, where you can choose the dates that work, the dates like in orange that are kind of okay, and then ones in red that you know that you will not be able to reschedule or make work. And that way, it doesn't maybe look like everyone's available on one day, so it's when the most greens were, but you don't know that the people that said no really absolutely couldn't change it, or if the other day where they could have changed it and it wasn't apparent. Just so they weren't available. It's just a way to do it to really know from the start when people can't do it.
Thank you. Jason?
I would also suggest that since we have sort of shaped our lives around Monday availability, that we kind of stick with Mondays when we can, because my whole family now knows that I'm not available most Mondays. So. Just a suggestion. Just throwing it out there. The other question I had was, it sounds like this is going to be a warned meeting because we're going to discuss board business and take actions and stuff. Okay.
Well, not take actions, but we are.
Policy actions.
Well, that's, now we are. Yeah, that's true. Now we are. Yeah, now we are. You're absolutely right.
And board retreats are also warned meetings.
Yes, they are.
So the public can come and sit and listen if they so choose, but.
Yeah, I was going to say that, yeah. Definitely.
If
Joanne?
Do we think we're done with the scheduling discussion? Because I was just gonna,
Yes.
do you have some suggestions about the retreat and how?
That's what I'd like to move on.
Okay.
At this point, I think we need to stick with the 18th. In this particular case, Tim gave me a set of days that we could use, and obviously we want Tim there. So, and so it kind of dictated the dates that I offered to you. So, sorry about that. Okay. And if folks are available to Zoom in, just we'll make sure that we have that option so that you can, if you can attend. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the meeting itself, what we'd like to accomplish at that particular meeting. And from my perspective, I think it would be a good opportunity to be able to identify some key areas that we want to focus on for the upcoming year. And so using techniques that we've done in other retreats where we kind of brainstorm and vote and that kind of thing, areas of focus for ourselves as a board. What do we want to do to improve as a board, as well as what kind of information that we would like to maybe focus on from a district perspective as well. Suzanne?
Before we even get into that, I really feel that the board needs to have a thorough understanding of roles and responsibilities of board members, what we can do, can't do, what lane's ours and what lane isn't. And then from there, you can go goals and objectives of what the board would like to work on, but the board really needs a solid understanding of what its roles are and what its responsibilities are.
Okay.
This board as a whole probably has not had that training. And there's probably only 3 of us that have really had it.
I know folks have attended the Vermont School Board Association training, and then we did touch upon that some in our May training as well. But,
Very little.
but we could spend a little bit more time there. The other thing we can do is finalize our norms as well. I would like to have us finalize those as well. So, and part of that is really identifying the areas of focus through the board's effectiveness, right, as well, right? Which can really tie into what you're saying. And, you know, we might want to do something like creating new onboarding materials, which would like help because we don't really have very good onboarding materials than those that just joined. Would probably adhere to that, right? As far as helping to have those roles and responsibilities from our board perspective clearly articulated and something we can hand to you and go through with you. You know, that's just an idea of something that we as a board could focus on, you know, as an area of improvement. And there's, I'm sure, other areas of improvement as well that we could. So think about those things. And then also think about, you know, what would we like to do from a district? I know that we have the strategic plan for equity that we're waiting on. So obviously there will be things based on the goals that we set through previously that we'll be addressing from a district perspective and tracking. But there's probably other areas as well, like, you know, that Caitlin started us on IB, you know, assessment, you know, for the high school. So maybe that's, you know, something you might want the administration to look at some of the other schools that dig deeper based on the surveys that we have gotten. That's just one example, and there's many others, I'm sure, that people have. But the purpose here isn't to identify those, but like having those big slices that we would look at in the board training. Mary Heather?
So I just want to clarify, so today, are we just kind of coming up with some bullet points of things that might be discussed at this retreat?
Yeah, so today my goal is more to kind of talk about that high level purpose of the board, or of the retreat, which could be identifying things that we want to do as a board to improve, right? And one of which is roles and responsibilities, that kind of thing, but not the specifics underneath that, right? And then the other one would be from an administration perspective, working with Tim and administration, what are a couple key things that we might focus on that's a little beyond maybe the strategic plan for equity. Maybe it's graduation rates, maybe it's looking more at IB based on the survey, the stakeholder group responses that we got back. Those are just like examples. We would like explore different ideas that people have and vote on. Yes?
I have a follow-up.
Okay.
I guess the other thing I think is important to discuss at our retreat is the process by which we will be initiating our next superintendent search. We are definitely going to be kicking off another process that will be lengthy and demanding for this group. So I want to make sure that we all have a common understanding about what we want, how we want to proceed, the process we want to follow, what we learned,
what did work,
and really and our expectations for each other as board members, and mapping it out so that we can try to do the best job we can. So I think that would be a really important thing to have in the discussion.
My bullet list as well.
Perfect.
Ellen?
I don't know what this would look like, partly because I'm new, and to Suzanne's point about needing to learn more about the exact roles and responsibilities, but we know we're gonna have a pretty tough budget year. And so it feels like whatever the facilitation would be to prepare a relatively young board, right, with newer members in the last few years, for a very different kind of budget discussion, and sort of establishing maybe part of its roles and responsibilities, maybe some of it's a little bit of context or prioritization or whatever it is, but it feels like a big, like there could be some fruitful conversation to just be prepared for what I imagine will be some challenging conversations over the next year. Oh, good.
Comment?
Yes, Brian?
Yeah, I was just thinking, a lot of times we're involved in topics that either we don't know much about, or we're getting one side information on. And I would like to see, when those topics come up, a variety of inputs as to what other people, what other schools are thinking in terms of these, whatever they might be. So once again, it's not limiting ourselves to what we are hearing. It's then going out and finding further information to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to.
Okay, so, I mean, we're going to have, most likely, based on the input today, we'll have an area discussion about board effectiveness, and that could be something that you bring forward at the retreat,
Sure.
as opposed to today.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just had another, so we read some chapters in governance core, and I
Yes.
haven't read the whole thing. I wonder if there's some chapters that might align with the discussion, and if we wanted to maybe identify a couple of chapters, just so we have read similar things and come into it.
I'll take a look at that, thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, I'll look at that. So, my fear is we have a lot, and I'm worried about the time of the retreat. And I don't know if it's something where we would want to have a retreat in July and then maybe do something later as well. I'm just worried that what I'm hearing is more than 3 hours, right, for a session. And so it's like trying to kind of carve out what can we do effectively within that period of time and not have too much crammed in there, so then it's not effective. And so I could probably talk with Tim a little bit and try to help sort this out, because I am concerned that it's just way too much. And I'm sure he has some good ideas to help us structure it well.
Yeah. So one of the suggestions you had was to finalize our norms, which I think is really important just to have, so we all are on the same page. What was not effective was looking in wordsmithing from the last retreat,
right,
looking at all of them there.
Right.
So I wonder if we could get a copy of those ahead of time and have our ideas already ready to go.
Totally.
And so then we can just finalize them, and that wouldn't take very long.
Yeah. In fact, I had put those in board pack several meetings ago, but we had to pull it off the agenda, right? And so it's ready to go. I can get that out to everybody right away.
But I would just agree that the reflection of the search and how we want to kick off the next one, and then the new budget or the different budget season, and sort of how we want to approach that without being like in the moment scared, just like how we're going to approach that I would say are big things.
And Lindsay, I think you had your hand up.
I think this is a good exercise that we're, in this moment, putting forward the ideas of things that we want to talk about. And many of these things could be covered at a normal meeting. It sounds like it might, there are some meetings where we're totally packed and we're going to go over, but there's also meetings where even if we just took 10 minutes at a meeting to be checking in with some of these sort of, I don't know, some of these are really detailed, like details, and other things are big. you know, or there could be an ad hoc committee, you know, but like, it's a really good list, and I feel like we do need to get to all of them, but perhaps there could be a time, a regular time during our meetings, you know, maybe it's one meeting a month or at every meeting, where we're addressing some of these topics that, you know, it's not an action item that needs to be dealt with that night, but it keeps getting tabled, and then we, you know, the strategic plan for equity, we could have a little bit of information or look at a piece of that, or, you know, onboarding. There could be an ad hoc committee that's working on an onboarding process. So I would like us to think outside the box, and the whole concept of a retreat is usually to focus in on sort of one thing, or we're not going to have everybody, but
Yeah, and my thought is that the retreat isn't going to do the work of these items. They would just identify items that we want to take on. So if it is onboarding materials, then we would then form a committee or do something around that. It wouldn't be, the work wouldn't be done there at the retreat. It's just identifying what our collective priorities are for each area, as opposed to actually doing a lot of deep dive necessarily in each individual one.
well, I see, in my mind, I see this meeting as being, we have a new relationship with an interim superintendent, and we have, there's a job description, but, we need to task this professional with our priorities, which we don't, it's not really clear exactly what they are. But, in a year's time, what do we hope to accomplish? What can we line up and organize and get ready to put in a pretty package for a permanent superintendent? So if, I see the retreat as an opportunity to kind of get organized and identify the tasks that need to be completed over the course of the next year. I agree, not a deep dive, but yeah.
After Suzanne.
So there's no need to recreate the wheel around onboarding. BSBA has a wonderful manual that goes through everything for new board members, and that is supposed to be requested for every single new board member as they start, and they're supposed to be given that. So there's no need to recreate that wheel. I kind of disagree that the board retreat should be just a place to come up with ideas of things to work on. I really think that a board retreat is a time for us to come together, learn together, and to get some work done. And I still, yes, there's a lot of things on our plate, but some of the things don't necessarily aren't ours to take on. But I still go back to having everybody truly understand their roles and responsibilities of board members, and what they can say and what they can't say, and what they can say that can be found in the newspaper or not in the newspaper. So I think some work around that is really a good thing for a very new board that's headed into hiring a permanent superintendent, negotiations for both teachers and staff, trying to build a budget or have the administration build a budget without any ESSER funds. There's a lot that's going to go on, but as board members, if you don't understand what your role is and your responsibilities, it's going to be hard to help with anything.
Okay. We've all been, I guess I'm just trying to understand what problems we're solving for, because we've gone through training, similar to not reinventing the wheel on onboarding. Trainings exist. I don't know. So I think if we cover that, I would just ask for like really direct language around what are the concerns where that's not being followed, and what are the solutions that are being proposed outside of re-watching trainings that we've all participated in, or rereading policies that we've all been reading. So that would be my one friendly to that topic of discussion.
Any other thoughts, comments?
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I was gonna welcome, have Tim because he'll be with us,
Yes.
right? On Sunday. Is like, are we getting any? Are we, like, anything
you.
that you would want to add?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important that the board understands its roles and responsibilities, which are vast. But they really come down to, board hires a superintendent runs the district. And that's the framework in which you must operate, especially if you want to attract a good, solid, permanent superintendent. Because if you don't do that, you won't attract a good, solid, permanent superintendent. So my task, one of my goals this year is to help you find a good, permanent superintendent. I think we were successful at that career center. She starts on the 1st. She's going to be fabulous. She watched what the board did over the time that she was an applicant, and the board conducted itself very professionally, very ably, and that was appealing to her. I know that because I talked to her about it, and that is going to be my role, to talk with you candidates about that, so that you can get a good permanent superintendent. So if we focus on governance at that retreat, and set a couple of goals that the board wants to accomplish, something around budget. I hear that all the time anymore, so you're spot on. It's going to be a big issue, and the board needs to set a goal related to budget, in my opinion. And you may want to set a goal based on something else that might be a big issue coming forward. Frankly, one of your goals needs to be land a good permanent superintendent.
Right.
Let's not lose sight of that.
Right.
In my opinion, that should be one of your goals. And then maybe a third goal around something else.
Right.
But any more than 3 goals, I think, is not productive. So less is usually more.
I wonder if we could think about goals ahead of time and come in with them and say, these are some of the things that I'm thinking of, so that we can just
Sure,
lay
that would be
them out.
awesome.
Like if we
Yeah,
all came with 3 goals.
that's a great idea.
It's really great to hear, like, that's the framework, like, oh, we're goal setting. Oh, okay, like, it makes sense now, like this, and I don't know how like broad the goals need to be, but I guess we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, moving right along here, the next agenda item is other. And,
Excuse me, Barbara.
yes, I'm sorry.
Before we move from that,
Yes.
can you give a sense of what we can expect from you as we move toward the 18th? Because I feel like, you're going to want to get together with Elaine.
Yes, yes,
Tim,
yes.
put together an agenda.
And
And obviously, we should have some homework perhaps, and
Yeah.
maybe our board marks. Can you give us a sense of
Yeah.
of when we can expect those things?
Yes.
And obviously, I'm happy to help, but
Yes, definitely.
just so before we move on from this topic.
That's a
just
great
so we can
idea.
Wrap it up with a conclusion.
Yes. Tim, will you have any cycles that you can work with me over the next? Okay. So if I could, and I need to work with Elaine as well, if I was able to get something to you, the board, by the week of, early part of the week of July 9th, so it'd give you a week prior to the retreat, would that help? And it would, with a structure and,
Yeah.
things to think about ahead of
Yeah,
time,
homework.
chapters
Yeah.
to read, if in fact we want to do that. Okay, that would be great. So we'll definitely, at least 1 week before, which would be like the 11th. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And so my question is there any, I'm moving on to other, is there any other business that anyone needs to bring up at this point in time?
I guess I'll just mention one thing. I just want to thank Caitlin for her years of work as the Journal teaching teaching and learning. You were outstanding in that position, and obviously, we're sad to see you leave that, but we're so excited where you've landed, and we feel excited about bringing Courtney back. And I just want to thank you for all that hard work. You were incredible in that position, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary Jo.
Just still gotta come to these meetings.
You
Oh,
can
we
tell
want her
them.
locked up. She's got the magic key.
Yes.
Proverbial magic key.
Only if we can like get them down to like an hour or whatever, right? Once in a while, that maybe, right? Excellent. Anything else for other?
Did everyone sign their MOUs for Heather?
Yes, everyone except for the two that are not here.
Excellent.
Still won't get paid.
And there you go. So if no other items, then I say we move on to an adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
A second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, guys. So we didn't do